Welcome back to The Real News. We are speaking with journalist Jihan Hafiz. She is live from the Standing Rock encampment site, which is forcefully being evicted by law enforcement and other military agents. And Jihan, I wanted to ask about how do you compare the militarized response that you're seeing today on the eviction date compared to how law enforcement has interacted and dealt with protesters and people who were living on the encampment site in the past?
Yeah, well, over the past 6 months or since this movement started, that the response from the authorities has always been heavy-handed. So you're talking about from the dog attacks in September to the water cannons in November to just daily life at camp. I mean, on a regular day when there's no eviction or there's no law or there's no actions happening, you're talking about the entire camp being surrounded by law enforcement. You're talking about 24-hour surveillance, those planes that are flying overhead, constantly harassing people, low level flying of helicopters. And when they have responded, as you know, there's been absolutely no discretion of who they're attacking, men, women, or children, how they're being injured. They use all kinds of non-lethal weapons lethally. As you know, there was one woman whose arm was half blown off on November 22nd when they used a sound grenade in a lethal way. And then there were a number of women who had their eyes shot out. So these are levels of abuse that you see that I saw when I was covering the Middle East. Um, and how they attack people here is on a different level because they almost always go after the natives first and people of color first. So you can see as they're arresting people and as they're attacking people, usually the non-natives or the white allies, they're not as they're not as brutalized as the natives are. So the people who are in camp, although I'm not there, there are Humvees going in. There's a full-fledged militarized operation to go into Asheri Shakoan, which has been a community camp for the past 6 months where families lived, where a number of different things were set up for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were brutalizing people right now out of the way of us in the media being able to document that. They have created a complete media shutdown in Osheri Shakoan. On top of that, they've been targeting media to prevent press members of the media from showing what's been happening. Just yesterday, Johnny Lee, who is a filmmaker working he's shooting a film with the Sundance Film Institute, he was grabbed right in front of all the journalists. He was one of 3 journalists to be arrested immediately when they came on to as soon as they moved forward. So the level of response from law enforcement, from the military, from the federal agents has always been violent toward Native people. You're talking about not just today, not just during the Osheri occupation, but in the history of the United States government. They're trying to move them off 1868 Fort Laramie territory, which was a document signed by the U.S. government to allocate, to guarantee this land to the native tribes of this region. So what they're doing here is not just a stand against the pipeline and against the desecration of their sacred sites and the pollution of the water. It's also for their rightful lands, land that the U.S. government guaranteed to them in treaties that they signed. So the stand that they're making, regardless of the brutality that they're going to face, they're doing it in honor, and they're doing it because it's something they feel as Native people they have to do to make a stand against what's happening now as the camp's being raided. There are Humvees that have moved in. I know that you can't see it, but if Unicorn Riot's doing a live feed, should be able to see it from them. They've come in from the North Gate with Humvees. The people that they're arresting are allowing themselves to be arrested. There's been no resistance. Nothing's been on fire today at all at camp, but they've been moving in. I wouldn't be surprised at how they manhandle people, though, because aside from them attacking people here, once they get on the buses to go to jail, that's a whole nother level of abuse that takes place. Earlier this month, when they arrested 76 people, they put 26 of them on a bus to Fargo, which is 5 hours away. They pulled all the windows down in sub-zero freezing weather and had all the men take off all their clothing except for their long underwear. So they were driving for 5 hours in a freezing bus. Some of them got hypothermia, and the National Guard was driving this bus. So those are the abuses they faced. People were thrown into dog kennels, refused food or water for 15, 16 hours, were humiliated by taking breathalyzers, not because they were arrested for it. There's no drinking and alcohol at camp. It's completely banned. They weren't, a lot of the native, they weren't arrested for that, but they forced Native people to take breathalyzers. So you're talking about the brutality. It doesn't just end here at the camp. They're going to be going through the process at Morton County. I went through it. I was strip searched when they arrested me. Everyone that goes through Morton County is strip searched or humiliated in some fashion. When I've spoken to non-natives and usually the white allies, they don't face this kind of abuse that that the natives are facing when these kinds of actions take place. So it's quite clear that the targeting is for people of this land and who are trying to make a treaty stand here. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of 90-year-old, 100-year-old grandmothers who refuse to leave based on the fact that that's their land. So you can imagine all their lives they've been trying to get back to where they belong. And now that it's happening and they're being removed, it's quite a traumatic thing for a lot of people. This is a slow process when they evict people. It doesn't take half an hour, just take an hour. It takes hours to evict people. So the traumatizing and the imagery that's going through a lot of their minds after being here at camp and after their history of what happened to Native people in this country, it is what it is, but that's what's happening here.
So, Jihan, can you tell us about the veterans? You talked about non-native allies, and we know that there has been a pretty impressive response from veterans across the country who have come to North Dakota to sort of serve as a buffer zone between the protesters and law enforcement there. What role are they playing today during the eviction? Are they being successful in making sure that people aren't being hurt by the police that are coming to clear the campsite?
They are serving as a buffer zone, but there's only so much that they can do because the military is going to move in anyway. So what they're trying to facilitate is that people are not attacked, are not, brutalized the way that they have been. They're trying to create a buffer zone to protect people. Yesterday, when they tried to move into camp, there are a couple of vets that came up and told the police that there are a number of different grandmothers inside of camp, children inside of camp. They can't just come in and raid when there are families there. So they tried to negotiate with them to remove some of the grandmothers, which brought us to today. That's the reason why they're now coming into camp, is because yesterday they weren't able to come into. So they have played a role here. I think it's been a media role as well. So when they hear the vets are coming, all of a sudden the media focuses again back on what's happening here. So I think it's created that platform as well. Well, a lot of, as you know, at one point this camp, Osheri Shakon, that's being raided right now, once hosted 15 to 17,000 people were in that camp. So you can imagine the structures that were built, the yurts that came in, the facilities that they opened. There was a construction site, there were medical, there was dozens and dozens of kitchens. So, of course, since they're not there right now, a lot of them are heading to new protest camps. One set up in South Dakota, others in Minnesota, Iowa, Florida, Texas. So a lot of the people who lived at this camp and who are part of this resistance are taking their experience in this resistance and they're driving directly to the new camping sites. So they're not taking a month off to go home or anything. They're driving directly from one resistance camp to another. And that's what's happening in the States. How if it's going to become what Osheti Shakon was and what this movement was is yet to be seen. But the fact of the matter is people are completely empowered, not just the natives who this is very personal for them, but also the non-natives who came and stood in solidarity and who helped build these communities. They're also moving from location to location to keep this movement up, because this was sort of the foreground for the fight against the pipelines and the fight for indigenous rights. There's lots that was learned here that's going to be moved on to different camps, and a lot of the leaders who set these up are also heading toward those camps. That's a major reason why they didn't want the military and the police to come in and bulldoze structures, because those are all brand new usable things that can be transferred to different campsites. When they come in, they bulldoze everything down. You have a functioning medical unit there that people from outside the camp would come get free medical. That's being destroyed. The kitchens, which have tons of food in them, fresh food that could even be sent for Syrian refugees or other purposes, is now it's all getting demolished and thrown away. So people here, when they were cleaning up, they were trying to recycle to create this new movement um, to continue what was started here at Osheti in different states. And it's already picking up because they're on location now, a lot of these camps.
We have been joined today with Jihan Hafiz. She is an independent journalist. She has been broadcasting live from North Dakota, from the Standing Rock encampment site, where law enforcement and military officials are responding to forcefully evict and close out the camp, which has been in place for several months in response to the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline through contested Sioux and Lakota Indian grounds. So we want to thank Jihan Hafiz for her reporting today. And thank you for watching the Real News Network.